Hello, welcome to the Buzzy podcast. This week, Chief Larry and I are doing something a little different. We're here at the home of Lorraine Teefey, my cousin, and that's one of the reasons, that's something we're going to talk about. And then on phone, we have my cousin Joe White from Fredericksburg. So we're really reaching out here. I hope we'll see how it goes. But thank you guys for doing this. Thank you guys for joining. And I've got a question for both of you. Lorraine, you're the matriarch.
Okay.
Joe, you're the patriarch of the Riggel dynasty. There were only 10 of us grandchildren, and ironically, you were the oldest.
Yeah.
And Joe, you were number 3, but now you're the oldest of the pair. So how does it feel to be a matriarch and a patriarch? I don't know that I'll ever reach that status like you
Well, it
guys.
feels wonderful because what's the alternative? 6 feet under. So I'm really glad to be this old, you know.
Now you're
85.
85, and
Yeah.
Joe, you're only
84.
84, so
Yeah.
1 year.
Yeah, so
Now, how did you get like this? And I'm serious. That first question was a little bit of a joke, but how did you make 80, 85, 80? What is your secret to doing this? I mean,
well, it used to be drinking, but it's not anymore.
well, see, that's a good answer, but I said, damn it, neither one of them drink. Joe, you don't drink.
No, but
any.
we used to.
So it's not drinking.
No, I guess it's leading a good life.
Leading a good life.
Yeah, yeah. And being happy. I was very, very happy in my all of my
Hereditary too,
85
I think
years.
is a part of it.
Hereditary. It's in the genes.
Well, I was an only child, so it was real easy for me to be happy because I got whatever I wanted. What was my nickname, JoJo?
We won't get into that today. I don't want to hurt your feelings.
What?
He said he doesn't want to get into it. Don't want to hurt your feelings. You don't know what your nickname was?
No, he was
Oh.
going to tell me.
You catch him on
Why
air
would
and he
you
won't tell you?
hurt my feelings if it's that bad?
Hey, I don't want any Jerry
Well,
Springer
it
stuff.
wasn't
All right, we'll talk about it another time then.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, my theory on living a long life is it's the fly swatter theory. As long as you're moving, God can't whack you.
Okay.
And both of you are very active.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing something every night, and Joe, you're doing something, it seems, every day. I mean, I had to fit your schedule to try to slow you down enough to do this.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the secrets.
But I
is-
watch a lot of Netflix too. I'm not doing something every night. Netflix is my life too, and my iPad.
There you go.
Yeah,
We can
so-
maybe have Netflix. We'll do a commercial with Netflix. That's secret too.
Yeah.
And avoiding stress and not worrying about things, that goes a long way to a long life also.
Well, stress will kill you. That's.
Yeah.
I think that's. They say.
I don't have any stress, and I'm not concerned about anything. You know, what goes around comes around. I mean, it's great life, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm having a good time, and enjoying my friends and everything. So
Friends. I think that's.
yeah,
another
I have a lot
component.
of friends,
Yes.
and they're really, really good to me. I have to have somebody get my walker in and out, and I always have somebody to help me. It's really, really a good life.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
Well, to have friends, you got to be a friend.
Yeah.
Two
well,
friends, and you get what you give.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another one of my theories.
Yeah.
And you're a
that's
good.
true.
You're a good friend.
Yeah.
Right.
And my grandchildren and great-grandchildren go a long way to keep me young and active.
Well, you've got them around you, right? Or who's
Correct. Mhm.
who's there now? Is Robin, Holly?
Well, Robin and Holly lives in Virginia Beach, and Robin lives about a mile and a half away. And then my grandson is also in Fredericksburg. Great-grandson's in Fredericksburg. And the other one is in Farmville, Virginia. So they're all very convenient to me.
Yeah, and that's another component of living a long life, is having a support system, having family.
Mm.
Really?
Yeah.
Now yours, Lori, Janine, where are they? They are
Well, Tommy's in
Tommy's in.
Dornstown,
He's
up
in-
near Montgomery County, in Montgomery County, and Janine's in Sacramento, in California, and Lori is in Stevens City, in Virginia.
Okay, so you
But
got
they,
two of
they
them on
keep
the.
in touch with me every single day. They call me every day, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day.
Now, don't you have some kind of camera system that
I
they
do.
they
I
can
have
check up
cameras
on you? And
inside and out, and they check me all the
you
time.
can't do anything.
Well, they don't see me upstairs or the bathrooms.
Okay.
So other than that, they can
You got
check
some
me. And I like that,
cameras.
because one day I fell, and somehow I ended up calling Janine, FaceTiming her in California. And I have no idea how I did that, because I'm on the floor. And then all of a sudden, this is like at 8 o'clock in the morning my time, she's on the phone. I said, where did you come from? And I'm laying on the floor, and then she's calling Lori and Tommy to let them know what's going on. So, I mean, it just was very strange that happened. So, we don't know. Maybe I have a ghost.
Well, what was, didn't something similar with the water tank?
That's what
That-
it was.
Oh, that's when you were on the floor?
Yes.
Ah,
Yeah, I've lost my balance taking the trash out.
uh-huh.
And then I fell and started up the cold water tank, and it went everywhere. When the fireman got here, poor Robbie Wood, he said he was never so scared in all of his life to see me laying on the floor in all this water. And I said, well, I'm either going to drown or I'm going to get electrocuted. So, but at that time I didn't care.
Because
it was
the hot water heater?
no, it was cold water.
Oh, it was cold.
That's what they were afraid of. It was hot, but
Yeah,
it wasn't.
you'd have been scalded.
So it was the day before Mother's Day, so went up to Tommy's the next day with Lori and Larry and celebrated Mother's Day. Went to the hospital, got checked, nothing was wrong. So it was a good time.
Yeah, well, you got a new water heater out of it, right?
But we did eventually. A year later, I just got one not long ago.
Married at what, 19? How old were you?
I was 19.
19.
Had my first baby at 21 and 22 and 23. So we
You had
went
3.
across country with me pregnant and came back with 3 babies 3 years later.
22, 3 years later.
Yeah.
Wow, I was working on it.
Yeah, and that was my husband going to sea and coming back. And then
You
going,
know those Navy guys, Larry? Those Navy,
Yeah.
she's telling Navy stories on.
Oh, we had a good life. Yeah.
Well, hey, Joe, the story that I was curious about, and I should know it because I've heard it several times. When you lived down here, right? What were
Right.
you all? Would you get a job down, Paul, your dad, or what?
Well,
how'd you-
no, it's I was born in New York and
Right.
in Washington D.C. and for some reason he never mentioned. He said, maybe we should move down there with his family and peace and quiet and get away from all this city living. Much to my mother's horror, she didn't want to move back here.
Uh-huh.
So let's see, I was seven years old when we moved back here. And God, it was depressing. I mean,
We've been in New York
I
City.
lived
Come
we
on.
lived on Riggel Road, and the only kid I knew was Lorraine. Well, she was across the creek. I couldn't socialize with her too much. And finally, when I went to school, I met Mary Catherine and Charlene Lumpkins, Sonny and Teresa Green. So we kind of grew up together, and that expanded. But I don't know. It was an entirely different life. It was a culture shock for me, actually.
Well, now
The
what
only
was
cultural
your,
thing we had was the bookmobile came once a week.
what was your dad? So did Paul get a job down here?
Yeah, he worked at the naval base.
Okay. And then what did your mom do? She was home.
She was a homemaker, and he only had the one car, so he'd be up there all day. And we had no car; we couldn't walk anywhere. I mean, you just couldn't walk down to Memos or Schumann store at that time.
So I can see where that was a short-lived. How old were you when you moved? And then you moved to Northern Virginia or Cheverly?
Well, we moved back up to Chevrolet.
Right.
Right.
Now, was that? I remember coming to visit. That was the house you and Pat eventually ended up in, right? The brick Rambler.
No, I had my own home.
Okay.
I sold that. She had that home for 30, 40 years.
And that's where you all lived.
Yeah,
Where you grew up.
Well, yeah. Well, of course, I went to Charlotte Hall. I boarded there, and I went there 7 years.
You went there at what, 16?
No, I went there from the 6th grade until I graduated.
Oh, 6th grade. You were even younger.
Right, but I liked it. I mean, it was. So I guess I was raised in St. Mary's County, to some respects.
Well, if you think about it, you ended up Charlotte Hall was at the very edge of the county. You were trying to get out.
Right. And then, my father, he discovered, I guess some people ask me how did he get down here? He was from New York, and his grandmother died and left him some money, so he just up and quit work and was living off of that. And he saw where the Chesapeake met the Potomac. He drove down here, and he ended up at Schuman's store, and he kind of liked it. And Schumann said, well, there's a place for rent over Fresh Pond Neck Road, and if you want to eat, Mrs. Riggel takes in boarders. So he rented the place and started eating at Mema's, fell in love with my mother, and they ran off and got married, much to my grandfather's shock, because she was supposed to have married Elton Trossback.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's the Airedale connection, maybe, huh?
Yeah.
Because Hamilton was down on Airedale.
Right, and then, I used to go over to see Hamilton. My God, he wanted me to pick tomatoes. 5 cents a basket in that blistering hot sun. That wasn't my cup of tea.
He was going to put you to work.
He did. Yeah.
Now, you say Miss Hattie took in boarders. Was that out in the house? Remember she had that building out that different people stayed there?
No, he
Billy
ate in the kitchen all
Smallwood.
tea.
He probably didn't mean her.
Oh,
She took in, she must have 5 or 6 boarders that came every night for dinner.
now you're talking Miss Hattie.
Yeah, I call her Memo, Miss Hattie.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I can remember, Mom told me something funny once. She said, I never let you and Stevie spend the night down at that farm. And I said, why? And she goes, well, I don't want to go into it. Well, she was worried about, who she had hanging out there. She took in all kinds of, it was like, you know what it was? It was like tenant labor. She would feed them and let them stay there, and they worked the farm. I said,
No one
Billy
ever went hungry
Smallwood,
there.
remember Billy Smallwood down there?
Mm-hmm.
And she had 2 or 3 others that slept out in the bunk houses or whatever they call them.
Cotton slept.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Cotton and Tinker in the shanty, as they called
The
it.
shanty.
Yeah, that was Austin and Susan Rebecca's home after they turned it over to Kaplan.
Oh, is that right? They lived right there?
They lived right there, and then the only thing Susan Rebecca kept was that bedroom where was off the dining room. That was her room in the shanty.
Huh. Hey, Joe, I got a story. I don't know if Mom ever told you this, but she said she was down at the farm with Buzzy, and she said her and your father, Paul, were in the living room sitting on the couch, and she said they were all the Riggels were around the kitchen table, and she said they were going at each. They were, and remember now, Mom was like I told Lorraine was an only child. Only children don't know what it's like to have brothers and sisters that will tell you where to go and where to get off and not worry about hurting your feelings. Well, Mom said she's on the couch going, oh my. And your father said, don't worry. This is how they talk to one another. You'll get used to it. She said he was kind of like consoling her or telling her, don't worry, this is how. And you can imagine what went around that table.
Yeah, speaking of dinner, one thing that amazed me about Memo, never once did she ever sit down and eat with us. Never once.
She
always
sat
went
over
around
by the
serving.
stove, right?
By the stove. She never ate.
That's
never saw her
true.
eat.
When we were cutting tobacco, and when at lunchtime, she always sat. Oh, she never sat at the table.
Never.
Huh.
No, Captain sat at the end of the table, pushing food at you, but she never did.
I really have very vague memories of him, of Granddaddy.
Oh, really?
Of course, I was, remember I
Well,
was,
if you see Ma and Pa Kettle, that's who they were.
well, Snuffy Smith
Ma and
and,
Pa Kettle.
and
Yeah.
Popeye. He sort of reminded me of Popeye, the way he kind of meandered around there.
Well, my first memory of him was when I think I was 4 or 5 years old, and I hadn't known him. He was working at the base. He came home, and Yvonne said, "Oh, go greet him." I went running out and gave him a hug, and he recoiled and all. I thought, oh my God!
Oh,
And I'll never forget it. And then later on, she said, "Well, even though he had 14 kids and all, he didn't show any emotions." So.
Well,
But he
someone
loved
told
his
me.
perfume. Evening in Paris was what you could buy him for Christmas. He was very happy. Evening in Paris.
Granddaddy?
Yeah. Pop Virgil. Yeah.
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 But I remember, I think it was Mark Bradburn told me what a wonderful man he was. And I was kind of like, not flabbergasted by it or whatever, but someone said he was very nice Mom always spoke fondly of him. He was nicer to other people than he was to his own. You know, did you ever notice all of those kids left that farm as soon as they could, except for Tinky? I mean, the other, however many it was, 12, 13, they got out of there as soon as, I think Manny and Lionel dropped out to haul ass out of there. Your mom,
Oh, they all
right?
didn't.
They left that farm. I think the old man was hard on him. Lester.
Yeah, my
Lester.
mother always said he was hard, and all. She said he always used to be jealous of all the Bradburn kids. You know, they would take a break, and after and a long rest, he'd give them, "You eat in 15 minutes and get out of here in this field." Blah blah, pick that tobacco and all this stuff. So she could hardly wait to leave.
Well, how did Lester and Grace get tied up? Speaking now, the Bradburns were here and the Riggels were there. How did they do?
I never heard the story.
Never heard the
No.
story?
No, so I have no idea.
Now, Lester was my favorite uncle, right? I'd say Grace was my favorite aunt, but Lorraine was the sweetest, right?
And-
Yvonne, I never really knew your mom too much, Joe. I didn't know her and of course, Aline is Aline. I won't say she was my favorite, but she was such a character. You couldn't help but like her and talk about her. But Grace, I always got along with Grace. She with Lester that time when he was diagnosed with cancer, I guess,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I went to visit him, and he said, and I think I took him a miniature or something. He said, "I'm not supposed to have this." He said, "But she's not here," so he said, "She lets me have one a day." He said, So when Grace came in, she looked around. She said, "J. Scott, I hope you didn't bring anything here for him to drink." And I said, "No, ma'am." And she goes, "Because I'm not much on him drinking like this." She was kind of letting me know right up front.
Yeah.
And Lester, meanwhile, sitting over there, kind of laughing and kind of giving me the sign. But back to your mom, she, I didn't realize this until much later too, how much of a example or role model on base. I mean, she was the head of the grounds crew, which is now like $1 million contract to take care of the base, and she had like 20 some men working for her.
Yeah.
And she was very
And
well.
they really liked her too,
yes.
because she would give Christmas. They would have Christmas parties, and she'd put a lot of food and effort into it. So yeah, she got up to be supervisor of the Public Works grounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had a greenhouse that made flowers, planted and grew flowers for the officers.
I
I mean,
bet that went over
there
well.
was a racket would be these days. So,
Yeah, it's probably
they
illegal
had their
these days.
lilies and their poinsettias for
Yeah.
Christmas and Easter and everything.
And then that's how Shorty Miller ended up down
Yeah,
here, right?
he was
Short-
working with her.
And she feels sorry for him, or
Well,
how?
I think the barracks burned where he was living, and he didn't have any place to
Well, was he
live.
in the military?
No, but he was living in barracks.
Really?
Because he was single, and so my grandfather gave him a piece of land with the idea that if he died, it went back to the family. So that was how we acquired that land. Yeah. So
Who's there now?
Marie and Tony Carroll.
Is Tony's still there?
Yeah.
Huh.
Mhm. Yeah, they moved a trailer over there.
Okay.
Yeah, they live there.
There's a guy, John Urich. I don't know if you know him or not.
Yeah.
But he saw the Shorty Miller. I have the Shorty Miller floor mat, right? I guess Dad ended up with it.
Okay.
And I gave it to him. I said,
Well, he went over there when he died, because Buzzy and I both went over there. I don't know whether he called me or what. And Shorty was still there when we got there. He was in his bed. So.
Huh.
Yeah.
I read the old Enterprises, and remember Miss Bean would write the Down County
Yeah.
News. Well, you could always tell the ones that Dad put in there, because he put things like James Cotton Riggel had an enjoyable weekend with his friend Shorty Miller. Well, they were both over there drunk all weekend.
Yeah. So-and-so visited so-and-so.
Yep, and then I can almost tell the ones that he put in there, because they're, all about our people.
Yeah.
In fact, I should publish more of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just mentioned James Cotton Riggel. I gave you his middle name.
Well, how come that was a mystery? Alphonse?
It's Alphonse. This Hattie named all the boys after the Puck Comic Weekly characters. And
What?
she named all the girls we noticed their names ended in I-N-E.
Well, what'd you say, what kind of comics?
Puck Comic Weekly.
Puck Comic Weekly.
Well, my
Back
father's
in the
name
old
was
days, it was
Lester
a,
Aloysius, and Teefey walked in one day and he said, "I'll know one thing, I'll never name my child Aloysius." I said, "Well, you're looking at possibly your father-in-law. You better be quiet
Yeah.
about that, because that's what his name was, Lester
I
Aloysius."
never knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Lester was out of Puck Comic Weekly. They all were.
Well, I thought they were movie stars, like Lionel was Lionel Barrymore.
No, they're.
No, that's not
No,
true.
well, it was Puck Comic Weekly, believe me.
Oh, okay, we went from movie stars to Puck Comic.
Right.
Was she a
Yeah,
big?
and then came down. She finally decided that one had to be named after Clarence. That was Buzzy, but she didn't stick him with Captain's middle name. She named him Hugh, which is also out of Puck Comic Weekly. She didn't give him Hosea.
But it's
Hosea,
probably-
whatever his name.
Listen, my grandfathers were named Clarence.
I never thought of that.
Clarence Bradburn and Clarence
I
Riggel.
quoted him in his book this morning. Now, tell me about that. Was he? You told me the other day. Who was in this house?
And Aggie and Uncle Johnny.
So where was? And so Clarence, you told me, was over in the
where
Merritts.
Bill Merritt lives,
Right.
Yeah, Bill and Ann.
And so it was Grace, Eleanor, and
Well, Mark, Warren, Aubrey, and Harold.
Harold.
Yeah.
Harold. So it's 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one more, isn't there? Another
Mark,
son.
Warren, Aubrey, and Harold. There was 6.
6.
Yeah,
Okay.
4 boys and 2 girls. Yeah.
Yeah. Aubrey, was it Aubrey? I forgot his name. The
Well,
young one.
they called his name was Paul Aubrey, and his
Okay.
family called him Paul, and
Okay.
we called him Aubrey.
Well, you're about the last of the Mohicans here, right?
Probably so.
I mean, as
yeah.
far as all that property's out to the family. I mean,
No, you got Nancy Baldwin.
well, Nancy's.
Well, Nancy
But
and
I'm
Linda.
I'm talking about living down here, Joe. I was talking about
I don't think
this
there's
being Bradurnville.
not
basically.
any Bradburns, because my great-grandfather Bradburn, he and Uncle Johnny and my grandfather went together and bought all this land on Fresh Pine Neck Road,
Oh,
and it was all divided into like Aunt Irene and Essie, Uncle Spencer and all of them. They all had land, and then eventually it got sold or given to the people that sold it,
mm-hmm.
other than me.
Now Robert Bradburn, that whole family there.
Well, Robert and Peggy are passed away,
Yeah.
but Robert's grandson lives there,
Oh, okay.
Bobby's boy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, then, so
Yeah.
that's still
yeah, that's Brad.
legacy.
Well, Uncle Howard's children own Aunt Irene's house also.
Okay.
Mary and Caroline, they own that. So that's still sort of in the family too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
There's some.
What happened to Warren's house?
Well, when they died, Johnny and Joanne got it, and then they rented it out for a while, and then they sold it. I don't know who lives over there now. It's a thing that you used to know everybody, and now you know nobody
Yeah.
practically around. Well, Bradburn, Marcia still has Mark's property.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
so there is one Bradburn left.
Hey, Marsha, I didn't mean to forget you.
Yeah, so she's got that property.
Right.
so-
Yeah. Didn't last.
Yeah, because she's the only one,
That's
and
right.
me and her,
That's right. You and her.
only 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to tell you one thing. I took Dad up to it was the VA gerontology unit, right? That somebody had said you need to take your father up to the gerontology unit. So I take him up there and he says, I don't know what the hell we're doing. So I go up and there was this nice young doctor and she was like doing the interview questions and she said, Mr. Riggel, you're doing very well for 83, 84, whatever it was. And she said, how are you? And he goes, I don't do anything. And she said, well, you've got to have some hobbies. What do you do for fun? He said, read the newspaper. And she said, well, that's not really a hobby. And he goes, for me it is. And she said, well, what other interests do you have? What are you doing? And he said, well, I sit in the store and wait on people. And she goes, no. She said, Mr. Riggel, you're a pioneer. No, other people have never lived to be this old. She said, you need to show your son and me how to do this. And he goes, I don't know about that. So needless to say, he didn't think much, didn't talk, give or take with her. But we're coming down the road, and he said, that gal, she might have been onto something. And I said, well, you gonna find a hobby? He goes, no, but I never thought about myself as a pioneer. And I said, well, maybe she had something to say after all.
Yeah.
Well, my point on this story is, to me, you're my pioneers.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to be able to
I'm
be
glad
active, to have
live
friends,
that long.
to live. Well, I don't care if I live that long or not, but I want to be. I want to have my fastball,
Yeah.
like you guys.
Yeah.
And I mean it when I say I kind of admire.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think that went pretty well. Larry, thank you for making. Larry didn't really want to bring all this stuff out, but I was doing such a bad job of telling him how I was going to do this. I think he started worrying about the quality.
Well,
But
thank you. I think it went well.
Thank you very much.